Welcome back to Red Card. I'm your host, Anthony Totera. Joining us right now, friend of mine, friend of yours, one of the best in the business from ESPN, Jeff Carlisle. Jeff, welcome again, my friend.
How are you, Anthony?
I'm very good, Jeff. Let's talk about it. Big win for USA, sigh of relief, and a gutsy performance, a passionate, energetic team. I thought this was all the right ingredients. Everything worked well, but there's still a lot of question marks moving forward. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's, I don't think it's, no matter how emphatic that victory was on Tuesday, it's not going to wash away all the questions from the game in Guatemala City, and it's not going to wash away a lot of the questions that have been building for the last 8 to 10 months or so. It's still a lot of questions about, the direction of the team and which players are in Klinsmann's core group, and is it big enough? I mean, you think back to, when Bob Bradley was in charge, you could, name 7 to 10 names off the top of your head of guys who, more often than not were going to be on the field. And, it's difficult to come up with a similar number when you think about Jurgen Klinsmann's team. Some of this is injury-induced, certainly. Guys like Fabian Johnson and Jermaine Jones and Matt Beasler would have been out there, but still, it just seems like there's an awful lot of chopping and changing from game to game. What's going to be the configuration of Klinsmann's midfield going forward? What's he going to do about his goalkeeper? So still a lot of questions to ponder as this team, now heads into Copa America and then ultimately the last 2 games of this round of qualifying.
The spirit was there last night, Jeff, and the passion was there, and you could see a team united. They wanted to really speak to the people out there and say, look, we're a team united in this dressing room. Whatever's happening in other circles, we don't really care about. But to me, the question mark, and you mentioned, is the goalkeeping one. And I don't understand for the life of me why he wants to play, revolving door with Brad Guzan and Tim Howard. They're both capable. Start one and continue on with one. That's what's done in most nations in the world, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's... I just sense there's a real hesitancy on the part of Jurgen Klinsmann to not so much give up on Tim Howard, but to kind of cast his lot with Brad Guzan. I mean, you can understand it to a degree because obviously, Howard is a guy that came up big for Klinsmann time and time again during the last cycle. But Guzan had some big games as well. So because there was a brief period there in qualifying when Howard was injured, and so now it's you would think that the Guzan would get more of a shot because Howard is not playing for his club. Obviously, that's going to change when he moves to Colorado Rapids this summer. But you would just think that the Guzan has kind of done a lot of the things that he needs to win this job outright. So again, I just think Klinsmann's having a hard time. Again, not saying goodbye to Howard, but saying, hey, Brad Guzan is my guy. And I think at some point he's got to make a decision because, things like, chemistry, between a keeper and his back line and then, obviously even the other elements of the squad, I just think that's really important. And it just kind of allows guys to settle into their comfort zone a little bit. I know that Klinsmann hasn't been big on comfort zones in the past, but I think in certain situations they have their pluses, and I think finding a consistent lineup, at least 70 to 80% of it, is something that he's going to have to do going forward.
Jeff, every time Beckerman and Zusi have put on that Team USA jersey, they've always answered the call and given 110%. These are 2 guys that are going through that revolving door. I don't understand for the life of me why he doesn't give these guys more of respect, more of security, and knowing that they're going to be called up each and every time, especially Beckerman. Zusi's had a lot of games under his belt for Team USA, but Beckerman is a guy like, I feel that we'll call you up when we're really desperate and we need you. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Beckerman's a real head-scratcher. I mean, I would have bet the farm that he would have started that game down in Guatemala City. You just looked at who was available. Obviously, Jermaine Jones is suspended. Looking at the roster and just the options that Klinsmann had, you would have thought that Kyle Beckerman was the guy who was kind of going to slot into that defensive midfield role. Instead, he goes with Mix Diskerud, who certainly is off to a good start in MLS this season, but that was a game that was going to always be a street fight, and that's really the kind of environment in which Beckerman thrives. And he's going to play safe passes, and he's going to play forward passes too to break pressure. And, he's pretty astute at closing down the passing lanes and breaking up plays, and that's what we saw on Tuesday night. So, his omission was a real head-scratcher for myself and a lot of other people. With Zusi, it's a little bit tougher because he's had some injury issues. He's even had some periods that, because of that, where he's been kind of in and out of Kansas City's lineup, and it's just a question of health. So that one's a little bit easier to understand. But, both players certainly answered the call on Tuesday and were huge, just big difference makers out there on the field for Jurgen Klinsmann.
Jeff, a big year here in Toronto for Josie Altidore. Big year for him, for nation and for club. Eyes are watching him. He's slimmed down. He looks fit. He looks like a guy motivated and focused. But I got to be honest, I've still yet to see enough to say to myself, he's worth every penny the TFC is paying him, and he's worth a spot on Team USA. Am I off my rocker?
I would disagree a little bit. You're always going to get into conversations about value and is he worth the contract, especially when you're making as much money as he is. Again, it's I think a lot of it's health. I think he has put in the work this off season, and like you said, he slimmed down. He looks fitter than I can ever remember seeing him, really. And I think he's still going to be a guy that Jurgen Klinsmann counts on going forward. We'll see what he's able to do, this season. It's a shame that he got injured again with that hamstring. I think that kind of, nullified his progress a little bit, and he had to take a couple steps back just in terms of getting back into shape. But I still think he's going to come good this season. He just looks more relaxed. He looks happier, and whatever. He's talked about in the past some things that were bugging him off the field, and it just seems like those have been resolved. And he just seems like a more content, happier individual. And I think you're going to see that translate onto the field. So, he had a decent season a year ago. I think he was averaging a goal every other game. I could see him surpassing that this year. If he stays healthy. I think that's always the big question with Josie Altidore: is he going to stay healthy? And but if he does, I think he could do some serious damage both for Toronto FC and for the U.S.
Well, let's hope for TFC fans he can stay healthy because they're expecting a lot from him. Jeff, just before we let you go, obviously the spotlight is still on head coach Jurgen Klinsmann. He's not out of the woods. USA fans, many of them still want to see him out of there. Sunil Gulati has put everything behind him, supported him since the day he's hired him. So he's going to go down with the ship if Jurgen goes down, I believe anyway. And I got to tell you, maybe you've heard this, but I haven't. I haven't heard too many former USA players that played under him support him, or even current guys come out emphatically and say we support him. I believe the likes of Michael Bradley, Clint Dempsey, and a couple other veterans need to step up to the plate and talk to him one-on-one in a room and say, look, these are the things we don't like. These are the things we'll bend and work with you, or else I believe they're going to have trouble. They'll get to the Hex, but in Russia, I believe they're going to struggle then.
Yeah, I think you've seen a little bit of that already. Just with the way that the January camp was conducted. I think the dates of it changed, and everything that I've heard is that was at the behest of some of the senior players. And Josie Altidore talked about it. Michael Bradley has talked about it. But I think it's one thing to talk about the logistics of a particular January camp and maybe what guys can do with their off time to make the days pass a little quicker. It's another when you're talking about tactics and maybe how certain decisions get made and Klinsmann's approach to some of these games, particularly on the road in CONCACAF. I think one thing that was so pleasing for a lot of people to see was just how aggressive and how high the U.S. pressed Guatemala up the field. I think that's something that a lot of people, and myself included, would like to see more of. Now granted, you got to pick and choose your moments against, the really good teams, like a Colombia that they're going to face in Copa America. But, I think some of those conversations are taking place. It's just a question of, is Klinsmann, willing to listen? Certainly he made a lot of changes that made a lot more sense in that second game against Guatemala. So, but with Jurgen, it's always a battle, I think, between the idealistic and the pragmatic. I think the more pragmatic he goes, the better off this team does. I mean, it's not that they can't play pretty at times or try to have some great attacking ideas, but I just think in terms of his his decisions, he needs to veer back towards those pragmatic instincts that he sometimes does have. I think he just needs to trust those a little bit more.
Jeff, very quickly here up in Canada, we got our lunch handed to us by the Mexicans, home and home. A real exciting, entertaining Mexican side that I believe is the real deal. I believe they're top 10 in the world. You've watched a lot of CONCACAF. You've watched a lot of world soccer. Are they, in your mind, a top 10 contender in the world today?
I think they're on the fringes of that. With Mexico, it's always a question of, can they sustain it? They've had these good spells, and then, for whatever reason, they seem to self-destruct. I mean, I can remember after the 2011 Gold Cup, a lot of these same predictions were being made that, hey, this was a golden generation for them. They're going to rule the region. Rather than kind of be on level terms with the U.S., they're going to rule the region for the next decade. And obviously, it didn't happen. They almost didn't qualify for the 2014 World Cup. So I think the talent is there. It's going to be interesting. And every Mexico manager has this honeymoon. We even we saw it with Herrera. Obviously that was a kind of a crazy situation with the way that he went down. But now with Juan Carlos Osorio, it's you got to wait until that first maybe subpar result comes around, and how the team reacts, how he reacts. To me, that's going to be the proof that maybe they are maybe ready to make this next step. Because when that has happened in the past, the confidence has eroded. Players not coming in, maybe not being as enthusiastic to play for El Tri. So I think that's going to be the ultimate test. That's going to be the proof to me that this Mexico team is for real.
Jeff, always a pleasure for you to take time to join us here on our show, Red Card. We thank you so much. And again, thanks so much for making time, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Take care now.
That is Jeff Carlisle of ESPN. Love having him on. Such a student of the game. Such a great guy. Hey, after this commercial break, a first time joining us here on Red Card from 690 TSN, live from Montreal, Tony Marinaro. We will discuss Canada and Mexico, home and home. We'll get his thoughts. Stay tuned right after this commercial break, live from Montreal. Hide the women and children. Put away all the sharp instruments. Tony Marinaro next here on Red Card.